Welcome to our Saturday conversation, joined here by Brian Neubert and Tom Dienhart. I want to thank our sponsor, the Purdue Union Club Hotel, reinvented and going as strong as it can be right now on campus at Purdue University. And it's a beautiful facility when you get the opportunity to get on campus. The 811 restaurant, the Boiler Up bar, despite the fact that it's about 10 below zero here, it's not quite that cold. But so maybe you'll be doing the Boiler Up bar indoors for a while. But great facility. I also want to remind folks that you can subscribe to GoldandBlack.com with the start of spring football, which we'll hit a little bit on this segment next Friday, the 19th. A lot going on the site with respect to football coverage. Obviously, men's basketball will be going hot and heavy here as we get into the stretch run to the NCAA tournament. Ryan was watched Trey Kaufman-Renn last night, so we'll have a lot on the site this week. So great time to join us at GoldandBlack.com. We're thankful for all those that have in the past as well and are still members, so we appreciate them. All right, Brian, you did make the trip down I-65 last night, Friday night, to see Trey Kaufman-Renn. We had a quick report on the site, but you'll have more next week. Just your overall impressions of what is one of the more prized recruits at Purdue, in one of many, but certainly a guy that's going to make an impact in college basketball here when he gets to West Lafayette.
Yeah, thankfully the game was played. Anytime nowadays you get in the car to go 2.5 hours somewhere, you always worry about what's going to change between the time you get in the car and the time you get out of the car. But as soon as we're done here, I'm going to undertake the arduous process of breaking down a video of a guy who had 38 points last night. So I'm going to be here all afternoon.
Yeah.
So that tells you what kind of game I saw last night. That tells you a little bit about what he's got going on in terms of his basketball skills and things like that. But it was an overwhelmed opponent last night. You know, Scottsburg wasn't much of a match for Silver Creek, but you know, he gets better and better every time I see him, and I've seen him play off and on for the better part of 3 years now. And he gets bigger. He becomes more of a commanding presence. His skill set just rounds out even more. I mean, he's a guy who literally, you know, can do almost everything. I mean, he can initiate. He's probably 6'9" these days. He can initiate offense with the ball in his hands not as a guard, but bringing the ball up the floor, things like that. He's a really good post scorer. He can make mid-range jumpers. He can make threes. He can face up and drive on people. He's just, wherever he plays, he's got a matchup. And he's just, I'm seeing a real competitive streak come out of him ever since the end of the pandemic. Whether that's, I'm imagining that or not, I'm not sure, because he's such a nice, normal, polite and humble kid that is sometimes those two things fly in the face of one another. But he's just kind of one of those guys that he and Caleb First both, they're just almost too good to be true as people, as competitors, and really, really good basketball players. They're both going to be impact guys at Purdue and complement each other really well.
Yeah, Brian, I don't know if you like doing this or not, but I always like having a comparable to a former Purdue basketball player. Somebody
you killed me there, because I came up with an NBA one last night, and
whatever. Just
you
give me
threw in Purdue and you killed me.
Yeah, well, give me a comparable. Anybody, I don't care.
Julius Randle.
Julius Randle.
That's probably might be a little bit of a stretch, because I don't know if Kaufman-Renn is going to be as big and physical as Julius Randle. But if you look at how Julius Randle's playing for the Knicks right now, he's handling the ball a lot. He's shooting threes. He's getting a lot of assists. I'm not sure that's necessarily going to be Kaufman-Renn's thing at the next level. This might be a little bit of a stretch, but that's what came to mind. So I'm just throwing it out there. But he's a guy who can do a lot of different things in a big body. This is a guy who, if he didn't have the perimeter skill he had, wasn't as good a ball handler, wasn't as good a penetrator, wasn't as good a shooter as he is. If he was just a post player, if he was just a 6'9", 200 and whatever he is, 30-pound power forward, he would be a high-end prospect still. All the other stuff's kind of gravy. But Julius Randle's the guy who came to mind, just because he's on my fantasy basketball team and I follow his stats every day. And he seems to do a lot of different things. I've watched the Knicks a few times this year, and that's probably a pie-in-the-sky comparison, and one of those, that's the high end of the comparison. But in terms of Purdue, I'm not sure Purdue's had anything. You know, Vince Edwards is the guy who comes to mind, you know, for good reason, because of the multi-layered skill set, the fact that I think there's a little bit of similarity in how they play, a little bit of similarity in their physical characteristics. They have the same gait. Actually, they actually kind of look alike a little bit in the face. But earlier in his career, I think that was a little bit more distinct. Now I think he's grown into being such a legit big guy, where his body has come along to the point where he's a legit 6'9". I think his body's really filled out, and I think he's more of a physical presence than Vince Edwards was. I think Vince Edwards too will always have more guard skills than Trey Kaufman-Renn did. In a lot of ways, Vince Edwards was like a guard who could play power forward, and I think Trey Kaufman is more of a combo forward who can do a little bit of guard stuff, but I think it's kind of flipped when you make that comparison with the two of them. I think Vince Edwards is more of a true perimeter player who could do things inside, and I think Trey Kaufman-Renn is more of an interior player who can do some things on the outside, if that makes sense. But that's the obvious Purdue comparison.
Yeah, interesting. And I know you said that the size difference is important too. Obviously, he's a couple inches tall, maybe a couple inches taller than Vincent Edwards, but a guy that it'll be interesting to watch play, I think, and Purdue fans that have to be excited about that. All right, we'll take just a comment about looking at Purdue men's basketball's road. Obviously, a disappointing loss on Thursday afternoon, I should say, in Minneapolis. But this is an interesting schedule coming up. Purdue's got Michigan State at home, a team you never want to take for granted, and then Nebraska on the road, I believe, this week as well. It's hard for me to get that schedule figured out completely, but this is, give us an assessment now, maybe close to 48 hours removed from the Minnesota disappointment from a Purdue perspective, and what you see for the road here as Purdue makes its move. Hopefully, for Purdue fans, a strong not only Big Ten tournament but NCAA tournament performance.
Yeah. I think they're fine. I think, you're 2 possessions away from being 5-3 in the Big Ten on the road as opposed to 3-5. I know that's a little consolation, but that's the Big Ten this year. It's going to be a lot of close games that are going to go both ways. They have gone both ways for Purdue this year because they beat Michigan State and they beat Ohio State in, pretty dramatic fashion. They lost to Maryland on late free throws. They lost at Minnesota on a bunch of bad bounces, essentially. I counted up 11 points in the second half alone that Minnesota got off just fortuitous bounces. Now, sometimes you make your own luck, but I think Purdue just caught some bad breaks. The 3-pointer they lost on was, on the playground, what we'd call crap. But that doesn't change the outcome, and that doesn't go down in the record book in any way. I think Purdue's fine. I think it's going to take them some time to onboard Sasha Stefanovic again when they get him back up and running again. I think they're a much better team. He's still not near what he was, I don't think. But I think they are, again, set up for success. I think the game at Penn State is going to be a bear. I don't think anybody's going to take Wisconsin lightly in Mackey Arena. I don't think anybody ever should take Michigan State lightly, no matter how much they're down. I know Nebraska took Illinois to overtime yesterday. I didn't see 1 second of that game, but I can tell you with 100% certainty that was more about Illinois than it was about Nebraska. Indiana at home, don't want to overlook them, but I think, Purdue's a better team than they are, and beating them on the road, you have to think that they have a good chance to beat them at home. I think, the schedule sets up for Purdue to if they just play as well as they've played all season long, they should have some success. If they get a little bit better as Stefanovic, rounds back into form, and perhaps the young players keep getting better and better, which I think they are still. I think Purdue's in a pretty good spot here. I don't think anything about the Minnesota outcome really changes that. You would have liked to have won that game, obviously, but stuff happens. Purdue could have played better. Purdue could have made more shots, obviously from 3-point range, and that would have made for a different game. But that's life.
Yeah. Tom, I'll go to you, and on obviously a week from yesterday will be the start of spring football practice. We have that confirmed. Obviously, closed to the public. We'll have access to closed to media as well, obviously in COVID world, but you'll have access to talking to coaches as they roll them out, and players. What you've written pretty extensively on depth chart and what you see, but what questions and do you think need to be answered early on? Is it just important that you get through spring practice and take another step? But what are the things that you think that Jeff Brom and company need to develop during the next 15 workouts that they're going to get here for the next month and a half?
Yeah, I've already written out a long list of questions, Alan.
Yeah.
But, I guess, defensively, I think that's going to be the storyline most of the spring, where most of the interest will be for obvious reasons. 3 new staffers on that side of the ball. Most importantly, of course, a new coordinator in Brad Lambert. Question number 1, what's going to be the base scheme, right? I mean, until we know that'll give us some idea of what the starting point is schematically for this defense. I know they're probably going to play a lot of different schemes, a lot of different alignments, but I think we're all curious to get at least an idea, if we're even going to be told anything, of maybe what the base alignment will be. The personnel issues defensively, I think, for me, begin with the line. I want to see George Karlaftis. Let's hear how he's playing, of course. He had a season truncated to just, 3 games, really a game and a half, with first the ankle issue, and then he got knocked out by COVID. How's he looking? Is he back in form? I'm curious about the 2 newcomers, OC brothers, Joseph Anderson, of course, from Auburn and South Carolina, respectively, and DeMarcus Mitchell. How's he going to fit in this scheme? He's outside of Karlaftis. He's truly a special talent on this defense. I think he could make a heck of an end. But anyway, I'll be fascinated to see how he's deployed as well. Offensively, guys, the line. How's that going to sort out? Is Cam Craig going to be the left tackle? Could Gus Hartwig be the center over Sam Garvin? Who's going to play the slot with Rondale Moore gone? And then, of course, guys, maybe most importantly of all, is Aiden O'Connell going to be an active, undertaker in spring drills coming off of his injury, of course, cost him the last 3 games. Will he be limited? So, again, I'm kind of eager to see if he's going to be full go or not. And then that quarterback job, I think, is going to be to be continued, just like last year, probably all the way up to training camp. It's going to be Jack Plummer. Is it going to be Aiden O'Connell? And heck, is Austin Burton going to get a crack at this too, guys? I would love to see him get an extended look. And then, of course, the freshman from Brian's home state, Michael Olamo, came highly decorated too. So there's a lot to keep people interested in during the course of these 15 practices.
Brian's home state, Brian's home county.
Yeah, is that right?
1 town over from me.
Which is what county?
Bergen. If he had grown up on the other side of Paramus, New Jersey, he would have gone to the school my mother taught at for like 40 years.
They're not naming the school after her or you at this point. That's still
not yet, anyway.
Not yet. Your significance is still to be determined here. All right. Brian, we talked a little bit off before we started this show on recruiting and the interest of on-campus visits and some talk about, the earlier start of spring ball could limit that. But right now, nothing's changed. And you're of the opinion, and I think I am as well, that I don't see a lot changing in the official visit category till the fall at the earliest. And there are some reasons for that. Why don't you flesh that out a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I know of coaches who don't anticipate the recruiting period being withdrawn anytime soon. I kind of wondered if the NCAA wouldn't do something kind of half measures with some significant controls on it, like 1 visitor on campus at a time, something like that. But a couple of things come to mind about that too, is, the NCAA does what its membership wants it to do. And, if college coaches everywhere were jumping up and down on the tables, trying to get recruiting concessions made, my guess is they would find a way to do that in a responsible and safe manner. Now, responsible and safe lies in the eye of the beholder, but I also think coaches have so much on their plate still with spring ball coming up, and having to keep their teams from getting broken down by this virus. I don't know how huge a priority it is for the membership. I could be wrong there, but I know that that was a real issue up front, where coaches just had enough to deal with that they just didn't necessarily want recruits. They didn't want to say we don't want recruits on our campus, but again, the NCAA does what its membership wants it to do, because the NCAA and its membership are the same thing. The other part of it too is, I don't know how the NCAA views this. This is just my personal theory, but like if you allowed any recruits to make visits, you're basically telling them at a time when I'm sure a lot of people are still really uncomfortable traveling and, really, really reluctant to do things like this. You're basically telling people that you have the opportunity to make a visit. So if you're not, then that's on you. And that sort of puts the people who are willing to, venture out into the world right now, get on airplanes, in some cases, stay in hotels, whatever it may be. And a lot of America is still not doing this stuff. You're basically telling people that if you're not comfortable doing this, but somebody else is, then that person gets to do it. And tough luck, essentially. And in recruiting, when there are finite numbers of scholarships and, whatnot, and there is a race, there are a lot of races at play. And if you don't let anyone take visits, then you're not putting anyone who's not willing to, take on what they might consider risk at this point. You're not putting them at a disadvantage. I don't know if that's anything in the NCAA's thinking or not, but that's just kind of what comes to mind for me. When this all opens back up, everybody wants this to be as even a playing field as possible. Obviously, the decisions will lie with the respective families, but it is a multi-layered topic. Now, what the jumping off point is here, I have no idea. When does the NCAA say, or when do the people the NCAA is listening to say, all good now? X percentage of the country has been vaccinated. The numbers are down to this level. The, cases per day, whatever metric they use to determine where we are with this. I have no idea how the NCAA is going to handle that. But at some point in time, they're going to have to make a decision and say, okay, life can resume again. But I have no idea what point that is, but I don't think it's happening anytime soon.
Tom, and I think that's a valid point. Tom, you talked to Tom Moreland, the senior associate athletic director for strategic initiatives this week, and obviously Purdue football, and this kind of ties together. Purdue started selling season football tickets as well, and renewals I think aren't actually starting until the 23rd of February. But my question is, again, we've saw some things about Major League Baseball this week, and Anthony Fauci talking about how he's a big Nationals fan. What's going to happen in terms of that. It sounds like that season's going to start on time. Even Rob Hummel, when we talked on Gold and Black Live, felt the Olympics is going to come off. So I think we're poised to have football next year and start it on time. What the race will be, can you have fans in the stands and yet Purdue selling tickets, which to me is what you have to do. But what was your take on talking to Tom and some of a lot of gnashing of teeth, or let's just say a lot of logistical challenges still to be figured out before that first game, September 4th against Oregon State?
Yeah, they're going to be as cautious as they can, Alan, to make it a safe environment, number one. He was very clear about that as far as their protocols go for getting in the stadium. I know fans didn't get to last year. Some of us did as media members and family members, so we were subject to some temperature checks and things like that. So they have to get all those ironed out to make sure it's safe. He obviously understands the need to get fans in the stands. I think we all do that after reading a lot of the horrific stories about financial bleeding from these athletic departments. So Alan, he's planning on hopefully a full house. And I think you talked about they have to plan as if everything's going to be okay. If things aren't, they can adjust on the fly and scale back. But what that percentage will be, who knows? Hopefully at least 50%. Maybe there still will be some component of social distancing involved with the seating. I'm sure face mask coverings probably will be required. And, you talked about Major League Baseball and Anthony Fauci. Well, Tom Moreland brought that up in my conversation with him as well, saying that Major League Baseball could be a good benchmark for college football. Keep an eye on what's happening with the attendance at those venues this summer. How many people are being allowed in? Again, that's not going to be the be-all, end-all, but I'm sure, their benchmarks and how they're handling it is going to go a long way toward Big Ten schools in particular determining maybe what they want their capacity to be in the fall.
Yeah, those numbers are most certainly going to increase, assuming that there aren't variant issues or with the virus. But yeah, what you see in April for Major League Baseball, I think the talk should be different in July, and yeah, that whole notion of following the NBA bubble kind of has started to been the model for a lot of this for folks as they move forward, and that will be an interesting thing to watch as we roll to the end of this. All right, Brian, I'll give you a final word. Anything else that from the things we've talked about that you want to add to the fray before we say the end of this Saturday conversation?
Yeah, I think the presidents will have a lot of say in college football attendance, obviously, because, as we've talked about so often over the last year, is that they're trying to keep their universities open too. And obviously we don't know where we're going to be in September. Hopefully we're in a good place, but I think that's still the priority. The comparison to Major League Baseball, I think there's a little bit of that's a good comparison and will be a good benchmark for everybody. But I think there's some nuance involved there where you have a younger, more brazen population coming to your games. I think there's more of a social element to college football than there is Major League Baseball. But also, I think that, college presidents will look closely at how many of those students are going to be packed side by side at those games, and think very carefully about where their universities are at that point in time, because it's Mike Babinski who always says we want to make this a one-year problem and not something that slides into the future. But it's probably the same way university presidents want to look at this too. Is the last thing you want to do is get to the seventh inning of this thing, if not the eighth inning, and then have some sort of incident, some sort of outbreak because you had 5,000 kids in a student section and 1,000 of them came out with COVID before being vaccinated. I have no idea what kind of schedule young people are going to be on for the vaccine. I'm guessing they're not at the top of the list, even though I think there's an argument to be made about college campuses being, what's the term? Compressed housing. Is that what the term is, where people live right on top of one another?
Dense. It's very dense. Densely populated.
Dense population. So I don't know where we're going to be. I mean, we're only speculating right now. I mean, for all we know, hopefully by September 1st, this is something we're all kind of sitting back, fondly reminiscing about, like a VH1 list show or something. But I think the best of the 2020s.
I love those shows.
I'm going to bet against that, but I honestly have no idea where we're going to be in 6 months. Hell, I have no idea where we're going to be next week.
Hey, have you guys thought about this? This would be just about the time, guys, when we're getting ready to kick off a Big Ten winter spring season that was such a hot topic of discussion. Of course, the FCS ranks, they are starting. I think McNeese State's playing today. Of course, our friend Brock Spax, Illinois State Redbirds, they're going to be playing football this winter. Just think about that, guys. We would be getting ready for Big Ten football right now. And think about this. What has changed between August and now that made the environment any safer, any different?
I don't even want to walk to my car right now, let alone play a football game. What's changed right now? I got out of the business of checking the numbers every day just for my own mental health. So I don't necessarily know where.
There still wouldn't be fans in the stands, Brian.
There still wouldn't be fans in the stands. You're right. But
that is true.
Maybe it's a little bit.
Yeah,
I don't. There's less unknown. I think that's an important point to make. Is I think when everybody else was deciding whether to play in the fall, I think there was real question whether or not this was going to get better. And on what schedule it might get better. There was question about when the vaccine was coming. We have the vaccine now. Not everybody has it stuck in their arm yet, obviously, and that won't take place for a while for a lot of people, but at least we know that positive things are happening toward moving out of this. I think, the more time that passed to allay concerns about, the after effects of COVID, again, I still don't think we have enough data to say anything particularly definitive. And I will continue to point out to people that Purdue has a kid on its basketball team who still has not really practiced this season. So diminishing that topic as unimportant is, I think, grossly irresponsible. But I just think we know more. I just think we're in a better place. And I think the important part for some of the people playing this winter is just having a season period. And I think that was always the Big Ten's goal, even when they wanted to play in the winter. I think when you look at what they did in the fall, didn't necessarily work. I mean, it got you where you wanted to go. Ohio State played for the national title. You had games, but you also had chaos, absolute chaos. All sorts of. If you were trying to keep teams from getting the virus, you failed because obviously it was chaos. But you had a season, and that was the most important part, really. And anybody who didn't want to participate didn't have to participate. But it didn't go off as smoothly as everyone hoped when they laid out those protocols that seemed, ironclad. But I just think we're in a better place, and better is relative. Still, I just think we're in a better place with the virus right now. So I think by kicking the season back to the spring, I think some of these smaller schools, gave themselves, a little bit more peace of mind. Also, I don't know what their deal is too. I don't know if them playing in the winter gets them on TV more. I have no idea. I don't know what it does to their recruiting. I don't know what it does to their turnaround for next season. I haven't studied the dynamics there at all, but it is a once in a lifetime situation, hopefully.
Yeah. Mitch Daniels also did have a letter this week that really outlined Purdue's desire from a university standpoint to be as normal as possible for the spring. I mean, for the fall. And yet, again, that's all something you have to plan for to make it happen. You got to start planning for that kind of stuff now and be nimble. That's the operative word. So, all right, we will put an end to this session. We want to thank our sponsor, the Purdue Union Club Hotel, reinvented facility on campus, and I know they're looking forward to the end of this and return to people coming to campus a little bit more often. But we've beautiful facility and a lot going on at the Union as well. And of course, a reminder too that you can subscribe to GoldandBlack.com. A lot going on with the start of spring football practice, the earliest ever, February the 19th. And also, obviously, the Purdue's men's basketball team's road to the NCAA tournament or the rest of the Big Ten schedule is going to be interesting, and we'll be all over that in addition to recruiting. So have a great week, everybody. Tom and Brian, please do the same. We'll look forward to talking again soon. And we appreciate all of you taking the time to listen and or watch our Saturday conversation. Have a good week, everybody.